Hey everybody, how are you doing today? Today we will be talking about basic decks that those of you who are new to playing Yu-Gi-Oh! And those of you who are experienced in Yu-Gi-Oh! Can all play. Now, this is a no-brainer, of course. The deck I'm talking about is Elemental Heroes. Yes, people, Elemental Heroes. Elemental Hero decks are awesome. Okay? Now, I don't run Elemental Hero decks because number one, I like to be different from everybody else. Number two, I only use my Apocalypse deck because it's a deck that I'm trying to perfect. And three, I'm sick and tired of seeing them. However, I respect Elemental Heroes. I think this is the most balanced deck in the meta. There's nothing broken about Elemental Heroes except for Super Polymerization in some cases, but at the same time your opponent has to discard to use Super Poly, so you might argue that it's not that broken. If all decks could be like Elemental Heroes, I think Yu-Gi-Oh! Would be almost a perfect and perfectly balanced game. Now, a friend of mine's plays a game called Vanguard, and I've been playing it lately. I've ordered my first pack of cards online, and that game seems pretty balanced. But going back to Elemental Heroes, well, let's just say the reason I mentioned the whole Vanguard thing is to make a comparison between how Yu-Gi-Oh! Should be in terms of decks being superior to others. Because, like, as I mentioned before, Inzectors are, like, so much better than all other decks. There's no point to even try to compete with them. I mean, it all depends on the deck you run. My deck is very good at beating rabbits, is extremely bad at beating. No, it's really good at beating rabbits, really bad at beating Inzectors, and it's decent against windups, depending if I get looped or not. But Elemental Heroes are the best deck in the game, in my opinion. The best archetype. Because, number one, they're balanced. But apart from there being a balanced deck that's not too broken, not too overpowered, the thing I love about Elemental Heroes more than anything else is that they have so much support. I mean, literally, there is so much support with this deck. I mean, there's so many Elemental Hero fusion cards that you can't even make a full extra deck if you were to put them all at one. I mean, this deck has so much support, and this is just the monsters. I mean, you have EE Call, EE Emergency Call, you have Reinforcement of the Army. And, I know some cards get more play than others, like obviously Stratos gets more play than a Sparkman, or Prisma gets more play than Elemental Hero Poison Rose. But other than that, this deck is really good. And anybody who gets into Yu-Gi-Oh! Should start off with an Elemental Hero deck. Because number one, you're going to win probably about, I'd say, 50 to 60% of your duels. And it helps you learn about the fundamentals of dueling. Now, I don't think it's that great to use in this game, especially because of the fact that now we have synchros and exceed monsters. And since this deck is a fusion heavy deck, you won't be able to necessarily learn all of those modern elements to Yu-Gi-Oh! But at the same time, you learn so much about summoning, you learn about attacking at the right times, you know how to you gain strategy, you learn how to use your deck. Now, I think there's many things to becoming a successful duelist, but one of the most important things is experience with a deck. Now, with my Apocalypse deck, as I mentioned before a million times, I have played that deck enough that I know when to defend, I know when to take hits, I know when to use the spell or trap card, and sometimes I make the wrong decision, but, I mean, you have to take chances in Yu-Gi-Oh! And playing heroes is really cool. I mean, nobody will complain if you use an Elemental Hero deck. Nobody complains. It's a solid deck to play against. Apart from Elemental Heroes, we have Dark Worlds. Now, a lot of people want to make the point that Dark Worlds are broken. Well, sorry, I spelled it wrong. Dark World. What the heck? Um, There we go. Sorry, it was spelled apart. So basically, Dark World decks are really good. They have a lot of support too, and that's another reason why they're so overplayed. It's no longer an opinion; it's a fact. The more support a card has, the better it is. I mean, Dark World decks and Elemental Hero decks, I think, are some of the best decks to play against. Now, Michael Balan won the YCS Long Beach, I believe, with his Dark World deck. And once he won that, everybody started using Dark Worlds. But then Dark Worlds have kind of lost in play because, I mean, there's so many ways to stop them. And honestly, in my opinion, I don't think Dark Worlds are that broken. The only thing I believe is kind of broken about Dark Worlds is whenever you can have a weak Dark World monster like Brow. So you would summon Brow, then bring it back to your hand, and then special summon Grapha. And then you use Dark World Dealings to just discard Brow, and then draw a card. And then you remove Brow from your graveyard, and then you draw another card. I mean, and then you discard again. I mean, that's the only thing I think is kind of broken. I mean, Brow, the whole Brow and Grapha combination is kind of broken in my opinion. But other than that, this deck is pretty balanced. They have their weaknesses. Dark World decks play absolutely no traps. Like literally, when you attack a Dark World deck, it's basically like just, getting a free hit. They never have trap cards, which, kind of limits the effectiveness of their deck. And sometimes they can be slightly inconsistent. But at the same time, Dark Worlds are still so good because they have such a great offense. Moving on, let's also talk about agents. Now, agents have kind of lost some play because of the ban list hitting the Agent of Earth Mystery, and I believe Master of Hyperion was once limited to 2. Now, let's be honest, these 3 agent cards are basically the only cards that you will ever see get play, and in some very, 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 very rare cases, you might see a Mercury. Very rare. I mean, because basically, these are the only 4 agents you may ever see. These 2 are kind of never played. I mean, I have seen a deck one time that was kind of creative with the Agent of Judgment Saturn, and the whole purpose of that deck was to have more life points than your opponent, and then just keep using his effect to inflict damage to your opponent or something like that. So I mean, it was too situational. It wasn't as effective, but agents are decent, especially with the whole Agent of Venus, Agent of Creation Venus using her effect, special summon 2 Shine Balls, then bring out Gachi Gachi, gain 400 attack. Gachi Gachi becomes a good wall. That's a good strategy. So, if you were new to Yu-Gi-Oh, I suggest you start using Agents, Dark Rolls, or Elemental Heroes. And if you really want to get straight into modern gameplay, I know you might not think about it, but you should look up online how to build a Rescue Rabbit deck. Because rabbits, honestly, they help teach a lot about the fundamentals of the game. They're slightly more difficult to play for noobs, but they're a very, very, very good deck to use. They're slightly more complex than others. There's many varieties of Dino Rabbit decks. I mean, I run a Dino Rabbit OTK deck, I believe, where basically, let me find my rabbit deck. Well, there's no point in really doing that. Um, Basically, I summon Rabbit and then summon Noble Knight Artorigus, overlay, special summon Blade Armor Ninja, and then sometimes I might put in Excalibur. And then you basically do an OTK with those. But, I mean, apart from that, I mean, rabbits aren't really that broken. I mean, my rabbit deck beats most people, but it's not great. Rabbits are losing play, especially now because of, no more priority for them. But rabbits are still good, and if you're new to Yu-Gi-Oh, I also suggest you make a rabbit deck. So now, I suggested Dark Worlds, Agents, Elemental Heroes, and Rabbits. And if I were to think about the last deck that can teach basic Yu-Gi-Oh skills along with winning a lot of duels, would have to be the new Chaos Dragon deck. Now, I don't really care if you steal my deck recipe. This deck probably sucks anyways. I don't even use Chaos Dragons. I only use one deck out there because I'm trying to perfect the deck. But Chaos Dragons are pretty good. I don't have much experience playing this deck. But, I mean, this deck also teaches you a lot about strategy. It teaches you about sending the right cards to the grave. And, there are other decks out there that are decent, that I should mention but shouldn't really go into. I mean, Chaos Dragons are really, 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 really strong. That's basically the whole purpose of their deck. And Light Pulsar Dragon is amazing because it can basically just die and then bring out Red Eyes, and then if Red Eyes comes back, then you bring out Light Pulsar. So you basically make like a never-ending chain between Red Eyes and Light Pulsar Dragon. But apart from Chaos Dragons, I think Light Sworns are also a pretty decent deck for those of you who are new to Yu-Gi-Oh! I mean, I'm not gonna lie, I like Light Sworns. I think they're a good deck. This card is very, very, very broken, but it's situational. And, you know, the reason Light Sworns don't see much play is because they're extremely, extremely inconsistent. I mean, extremely. So, basically, you're never... a lot of times Light Sworn decks mill Judgment Dragon, and then they have to waste a monster reincarnation to get Judgment Dragon back, and then, a lot of millions of things can happen. And then they have to use Beckoning Light, and then, I mean, it's just, if you base your whole deck around Judgment Dragon and then it gets solemned or bottomless, you're basically screwed. So that's the whole reason I don't really, take the whole Lightsworn engine as a big deal, but it works really, really, really good with Chaos Dragons. I don't think Chaos Dragons are a top tier deck, in my opinion. I still think Inzectors are broken as hell. They should, Inzectors should be hit by this card. It's called Eradicating Airsoul. Eradicating Airsoul should be played in everybody's deck just to kill those stupid fucking insects, okay? Everybody should side deck 3 Eradicating Aersouls just for Inzector decks. Just for those stupid insect bastards who want to come up and say, I want to play Inzectors, yeah. I've side that once in my locals as a joke, and then somebody was like, are you serious? Yeah. I like slaughtered his Inzector deck in my Apocalypse deck because I just used this card instead of my Smashing Grounds and Hammer Shots, and I just wiped out all of his insects, and he's like, damn it. So anybody, if you want to know about a good side decking card, play Eradicating Airsoul. You're gonna say, oh, well, it's too situational. Yeah, but there's so many fucking Inzector decks out there that this card is worth a side deck. And I know the purpose of this video is to talk about basic decks out there that are good for noobs, but this card is perfect for those fucking Inzectors. I really hate them. And if you really want to know how much I hate them, watch my 25-minute rant on why I hate that stupid deck that should have never existed in reality. So, basically, I think that's it. Maybe I could also mention Gravekeepers. I mean, I don't really use this deck that much either. I don't really use much decks, because I think everybody should make a deck of their own and try to focus on it. But Gravekeepers are decent. I mean, especially with Royal Tribute, that can really hurt some decks. Gravekeepers are good. They don't see much play, but I think they can, they can teach you a lot about the basics of Yu-Gi-Oh! I mean, you're not going to be doing heavy special summoning, but, I mean, I think that's it. So those decks are basically what I think all noobs should play if you're new to the game. And as you play and you evolve, you can play things like Heretics, which require, I mean, not much skill, but, I mean, they require a lot of setup to win. Because, I mean, if you're going to run a Heretic deck, it's basically just running an OTK deck. And I call Heretics Holy Marks because, I mean, basically the whole purpose of the deck is to just special summon special summon this guy, overlay this guy over him, and then basically just charge your opponent to the point where he has no way to basically stop you. I mean, my Heretic deck is decent. It's a standard Heretic deck. It's not good by any chance. I like these cards even though other people don't use them. I find them pretty useful because a lot of times, since I run some traps, I can just keep them on the field and keep them sturdy. But anyways, guys, this deck is advanced. Don't use heretics if you don't know how to play them yet. Please subscribe. I'm new to this. Like, comments to help me improve on my videos. And thank you for watching, guys. Have a nice day.